So this is lesson 7, Introduction to Polynomials, and what we're going to learn how to do here is classify polynomials based on the degree and the term, and then also simplifying them. So to do now, I would pause the video and try them. It's just distribution. Remember, with distribution, you take the number or term on the outside, so in this case, a -2, and you distribute it into the parenthesis with multiplication. Okay, so at this point, you should have paused the video and tried this. So example 1, you're taking the -2 and you're multiplying it in. So it would be -2 times 3x, which is -6x. And then -2 times a +5 is a -10. And now you cannot do anything else because there's no equal sign, so you're not solving, you're just distributing. So in the next one, you are going to take the 3 now, and that's what you're going to distribute. So 3 times a -4h is a -12h. And then 3 times a -6 is a -18. And again, there's nothing else you can do. That's your answer simplified. Okay, and then the last one, number 3, you're taking -4 now, and that's what you're going to distribute. So -4 times -2d is a +8d. And then -4 times a -8, negative and a negative again is a positive, and that's 32. Okay, and again, that is all you're doing. You're done, you simplified, and you cannot do any more work. So this is a review of distribution. And I would just remember that when you distribute, you are multiplying. Okay, so this chart here next is going to be kind of your reference. You're going to refer back to it throughout the lesson. So it just goes over what the names of certain polynomials would be, based on how many terms, that's the second 2 columns, and also based on the degree. Degree talks about exponents. So if we look at the first one, it's done for us. It says 6. 6 is just a plain number. It is what it is. It's not going to change. So it does not have an exponent. So we say the degree or the exponent is 0, which then we call it a constant, meaning it's the same. It's the number 6 and it's not going to change. The other thing here is that the number of terms, meaning it's separated by an operation. There are no operations here, so it's a single one number of terms, and we call this a monomial. Mono, if you look at just the beginning part, mono, the prefix just means 1. So that's the name of it. If we look at number 2 now, we look at the highest degree or the highest exponent, right? We have x here, and x has an exponent of just a 1 that you don't have to technically write. So the degree would be 1. That's the highest exponent. And the name that we call this is actually linear, which you guys have heard of last year, but the actual name for that is linear. And it looks like mx plus b, that form that you guys have seen last year. Then we talk about the number of terms separated by an operation. So here I have a plus. So on one side I have the 5x and the other side I have a 9. So that's 2 terms. Okay, and 2 terms is called a binomial. Think of a bicycle. There's 2 wheels. That prefix bi stands for 2. Okay, when we look at the next one, our highest exponent in the next one is a 2. So the name that we can give that, and this we're going to learn a lot about this year and next year, is quadratic. Okay, and then when we talk about the number of terms, we have 1, 4x squared, 2, 7x, 3, 3. So there's 3 total terms. And this one would be called a trinomial. Think of a tricycle. It has 3 wheels. So trinomial. Anything more than 3 terms, just so you guys know, is called a polynomial. There's no specific name that it has. So up to 3 terms, we say monomial, binomial, trinomial, and then beyond that, it's just a polynomial, meaning many terms. The next one, 2x cubed, my highest exponent here is a 3. This is the last one that you have to know the name for, and it's called cubic. And then again, we are going to learn how to graph that, what it looks like. This only has now one term. There's no plus or minus here. So it repeats the name, which is, again, monomial. Okay, and then the last one, we have an exponent of 4. That's our highest exponent, right? And when you have an exponent larger than 3, you would just say the 4th degree. So let's say you had an exponent of a 5. It would be the 5th degree. You don't have to know the names beyond 3. When we talk about the number of terms here, we have 1, 2, 3 terms. And that repeats again, and that's called a trinomial. Okay, so this is definitely a chart that we're going to refer back to throughout the lesson. It's a chart that you should kind of try to memorize. If you could make flashcards, you could make a flashcard saying if my degree is 1, it's called linear, and write down the example with it. It will definitely help you remember them. So if we move on here to where it says degree of a monomial, a single term, the degree of a monomial would just be the exponent. So let's say we had 2x to the 4th. The degree of this single term, because this is a single term, is just 4, right? It's the exponent. The degree of a polynomial, meaning when you have more than one term, is the highest exponent of all your terms. So similar to what we did in the chart above, if I had something like 2x cubed plus 3x plus 5, this is a polynomial, right? It has more than one term. It's actually more specifically a trinomial because it has 3 terms. But when you're talking about its degree, so the degree of this polynomial, it's just the term with the highest exponent. So in this case, the degree would be 3. So now we're going to use that, and we're going to just write down the degree of the following terms. So these are all monomials. So when we look at these, what is the degree of each monomial? So the degree for this one, 5x, remember there's an imaginary 1, so the degree is 1. For b, you have 6x cubed. The exponent there is a 3, so my degree is 3. 4, we do not have a variable with an exponent, so this has a degree of 0. That's our constant. We can actually write down the names as well. So that's a constant. This one, when it's a degree of 1, is linear. And this here, when it's a degree of 3, that's cubic. Here, our highest exponent is that 4, so this is a 4 degree, and we just say it's the 4th degree. Here, my highest exponent would be a 2, right? And that would be quadratic. So there's kind of one of each from the chart that we just did. And then this one's a little trickier. So you won't really see one like this, but it's good to be able to identify it. So you have multiple exponents. So they are all connected. They're one single term. So this whole entire thing is one term. So what you do is you add all the exponents. So in this case, you have 3 plus 3 plus 1, which would be 7. So to get this, you would add your exponents. 3 plus 3 plus 1 is equal to 7. So our degree here is 7, and the way we would describe it is just the 7th degree. Okay, and now the next ones, we went from a monomial where we had one term here to now a polynomial, right? So multiple terms we're looking for when we do this, each polynomial, we're just looking for the highest exponent. So when I look here, I have 11x cubed plus 4x squared. My highest exponent or higher exponent is the 3. So when we want to name this, it would be the degree is 3, which would make it cubic. For the next one, my highest exponent in this polynomial is a 4. So when I'm naming or labeling the degree, it's a 4, and it's just the 4th degree. Okay, for C, my highest exponent, when I'm looking at C, my highest exponent as I look through all my terms is a 3. So my degree of the whole entire polynomial is 3, which would make it cubic. And then the last one, my highest exponent, I have a 5, a 6, and a 5. So the highest exponent is a 6. So when I label this, my degree is 6. And we can just say that this is the 6th degree. Okay, so that's labeling or finding the degree of a polynomial. You're just picking the highest exponent. So in doing that, we now can talk about something called standard form. And this is a super important term that you're going to hear over and over. So standard form of a polynomial just means that you're putting its degrees of each monomial, so each single term, from decreasing from left to right. So in this box here, we're going to label or write something that'll make this a lot simpler to understand. It's just highest to lowest exponent. That's it. So when you're trying to put your terms in order, you're always going to go from highest to lowest exponent. That's standard form. Okay, once you're in standard form, you can find something that we call a leading coefficient. And think of what a leader is. He's in the front, right? So a leading coefficient is just the number written in the front, right? It's the number in the front where your polynomial is written in standard form. So we're going to try this. We're going to write each polynomial in standard form first, and then we're going to state its leading coefficient. So when we look at the first one, A, we have 3x plus 4x squared. So you're going to look for your highest exponent, which in this case is the 2. So 4x squared is going to be written first. So 4x, let's put the equation function in. Might be easier for me to write this. All right, we're going to write this out. So we're going to put our first term, we're going to write it first. So that would be the 4x squared. Then we're going to bring down our 3x, right? So now I'm descending in order from highest exponent to lowest exponent. I have a 2, and then I have this technically has a 1 here. So I'm in highest to lowest exponent, so this is standard form. And now if I want to find the leading coefficient, right, that would just be the number that's in front of this first term now, the highest exponent. So in this case, my leading coefficient, I'm just going to label it LC, would just be 4. So let's look right below now and try B. So B, we're going to start with our highest exponent. My highest exponent here is this 3. So that whole first term, 5x cubed, gets brought down, right? So now I took care of that. The next highest term is the 2. So that's a positive 7x squared. So that's going to be written next, positive 7x squared. After the 2, it would just be the 1. So that would be the 4x, because that's an exponent of 1. And then the last one would be my constant, which has an exponent of 0, and that's a -1. Notice that I took the sign with the term. So now this is in standard form. I have a highest exponent of 3, then it goes to 2. This is technically a 1, and this has nothing. So now when I talk about my leading coefficient, because I'm in standard form, it's just the number that I see in the front, the leader. So in this case, it would be a +5. Okay, and then if I keep going here, the next one says 2x minus 3 plus 8x. So again, I want to put my highest exponent first, which would be that 8x squared. Okay, so it doesn't matter the number in the front. It only matters the exponent. That's how you put something in standard form. After the squared, it would just be the 2x because that has an exponent of 1, right? So it's going down. And then the next one would be a -3. So now I'm in standard form. I have a 2, I have a 1, and then I have nothing. So now my leading coefficient would just be the number that's leading in the front, which in this case would be 8. Okay, now if we go to the last one here in this section, my highest exponent would be the 5. Again, you're only looking at your exponents, so it would be positive 5x to the 5th. Then I don't have a 4, so that would not come, there'd be nothing to write down for that. If I keep descending, it would be the 3, the exponent of 3, so that's a positive 3x cubed. Okay, again, I don't have a 2, right, but I do have a 6x now, so that's going to go next. Okay, and then I have a constant of a -9 or a -9. And always think back that if I start with 4 terms, 1, 2, 3, 4, my answer should also have 5 terms. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm sorry, 4 terms, not 5. So now my leading coefficient for this one is, again, now that I'm in order from highest to lowest exponent, my leading coefficient is just the leader or the number in the front, which is a 5. Okay, so the next ones are exactly the same. You're doing the exact same thing. It's saying, what is the leading coefficient? So now without actually asking you to put it in standard form and find the leading coefficient, you have to understand that if I want the leading coefficient, right, that I must be in standard form. So I gave you on the side some steps because I want you guys to be successful with this. So I'm telling you, step 1 is to write in standard form, which again just means highest to lowest exponent. And only the exponent, that's all you would look at. Then you're going to state the coefficient in front of the term with the highest exponent. So for the first one, if I put this in standard form, it would be, the x squared would go first, so 5x squared, right? Then it would be the -4x, and then the -7. So my leading coefficient here would be the 5. Okay, so now if I go on to the next one, if I put this in standard form, highest exponent here is the 5, right? So I'm ignoring everything else. Just look at the exponents. Highest is a 5, so it'd be x to the 5th. Then I'd bring down the 4, so 6x to the 4th. Then it would be the minus the x. And then it would just be plus 9. So now with this one, you actually don't see a number in front of this x to the 5th, but when that happens, there is technically a 1 there. So my leading coefficient for this question, leading coefficient is just 1. Okay, and then the last one, if you're looking, you actually don't need to put it in standard form because it already descends from highest to lowest. So you have 5, 4, 3, 2, and then this would technically be a 1. So the number that's in front of my highest exponent here, there is technically a 1. So my leading coefficient for this one is 1. Okay, so the next one is exactly the same. So pause the video, try it, and then check your answers. Okay, so at this point you should have paused and tried. And now if we go over it, it would be the first one, the highest exponent would be this 2. So it would be 5c squared. Then I'd bring down the minus 4c, then the minus 8. So my leading coefficient is a 5. Okay, the next one, if I put it in standard form, this is where it's important to take the sign with you. The negative 13x to the 4th is what I'd be writing first. Then I would write the positive 6x squared. Then it would be minus 4x. And then a positive 9. Okay, so my leading coefficient now, the number in the front, is this negative 13. So my leading coefficient is a negative 13. The biggest mistake is that you forget the sign to take with it. So it's super important that you remember that. The next one, highest exponent is the 5, so it's 3x to the 5th. Then it would be the 2x to the 4th. Then if I keep going, it would just be plus x squared. Then it would be positive 5x. And then plus 4. So there's a lot of terms here. So my leading coefficient now is the number in the front, which in this case is a 3. Okay, so hopefully you did well with that when you tried it. Okay, the next one is actually a sample Regents question. Although you're not taking it this year, it is important that you kind of understand how to answer these questions. So it says, Mrs. Allard asked her students to identify which of the polynomials are in standard form. Well, we know that standard form means highest to lowest exponent. So we're just going to go through and see which ones are in standard form. So if I look at the first one, I have a 4, a 1, a 2, and a nothing. So that is technically not in standard form because I'm not going in order. Here I have a 3, a 1, and then nothing. So this is actually in standard form. And then I have 5, 2, and this is a 1 technically. So that is going from highest to lowest. So 2 and 3 are in standard form. So when I look at my 4 choices, choice 1 says Tyler said 1 and 2. So automatically I'm crossing that off because he said 1, and which is not true. Choice 2 says Susan said only 2. Well, we see that it's not just 2, it's actually 2 and 3. Fred says that it's 2 and 3 because the exponents are decreasing. So that seems like it could be the answer, right? And then Alyssa said that it's 2 and 3 because they each have 3 terms. So remember that having the amount of terms has nothing to do with standard form. Standard form deals with exponents. So choice 3 would be our answer. Okay, another question like that. It says an expression of the 5th degree. So that's key, right? 5th degree means our highest exponent is 5. So we're going to eliminate choices as we work through this question. So highest exponent is 5. So when I look through my examples here, this has a highest exponent of 5, the first choice. This one has a highest exponent of 6, so that's no good. Choice 3 has a highest exponent of 7, so that's no good. And 4 has a highest exponent of a 5, so that's okay. If we keep reading now, we have a leading coefficient of 7. So that means, remember what that means, leading coefficient of 7 means the number in front is 7. And if I look at my two choices, the only one that has the number in front being a 7 is choice 4. Okay, and if I keep reading, it says that it has a constant of 6, which means the number with no variable is 6. And if I look at choice 4, 6 is by itself and has no variable with it. So that's true. Okay, so these are your practice problems. Definitely pause the video, put them in standard form, and you're stating the leading coefficient. Okay, so if you tried them now, we're checking our work here. So if I put these in standard form, the first one should be negative 3x to the 4th plus 2x squared plus 5x. And my leading coefficient here would be the negative 3. Okay, the second one, I'm almost in standard form. My 8x squared stays first, but then my 6x needs to go second, and my minus 12 goes last. And now my leading coefficient here is 8. Number 3, we're super close again to standard form. My d to the 5th has to go first, so it's negative 2d to the 5th. Then it's the plus 6d cubed. Then it's plus 3d squared, and then plus 4d. So my leading coefficient now is a negative 2. Okay, choice 4 in the practice problem says when multiplying polynomials for a math test, Pat found the product to be negative 4x plus 8x squared minus 2x cubed plus 5. He then had to state the leading coefficient. Pat wrote down that it was negative 4, so he said it's this term here. Do you agree and explain? So can Pat determine if negative 4 is the leading coefficient without this being in standard form? The answer is no. When we look for the leading coefficient, right, we must be in standard form. We must be in standard form. So in order for me to determine what the leading coefficient is, I have to put this in standard form first. So if I do that first, put this in standard form, the first term would be negative 2x cubed. Then it would be positive 8x squared. Then negative 4x, and then the plus 5. So now that my polynomial is in standard form, my leading coefficient is a negative 2. So is Pat correct? We're going to say no, Pat is not correct, because when in standard form, the leading coefficient is negative 2. And again, that was a Regents question. So it was, you'll notice that a lot of times with these Regents questions, you have to be able to explain. Okay, and then number 5, write the polynomial in standard form and state the leading coefficient. So we're going to write it in standard form and then state the leading coefficient. So for standard form, my 7x squared would go first, then my negative 10x, then my minus 3, and my leading coefficient here, or number in front, is just the 7. Okay, so make sure if at any point you missed notes, you pause, you go back. If you still don't understand something, email me, and we're going to work on a worksheet on this. So hopefully it'll become a little bit more ingrained in your heads.